along the lines of a program in place in the 1950s. Under Presidents Truman and Eisenhower, immigration services rounded up and deported hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants, could have been as much as 1.5 to 2 million by some estimates, in what was then called Operation Wetback, which is a slur. Mr. Trump addressed the plan tonight with Brett Baer on Special Report.
Everybody knows I'm right. I don't even think it's tougher. Now, you could say that Eisenhower moved 1.5 million. I actually hear it was 2.2 million out. Or you also hear that Harry Truman moved millions of people out. But those were different days. That was, we were a tougher country. We had laws then and you obeyed the laws. It wasn't like it is today where people can do whatever they want. That was a different age. I'm saying this, it'll be done in a humane way. It'll be done professionally. The people can come back in, but they have to come in through a legal process.
In moments, we will hear from both Jose Antonio Vargas, a filmmaker and immigration activist who himself admits to being undocumented. Plus, Eric Trump is here, the Republican candidate's son and executive vice president of the Trump Organization. But first, Trace Gallagher has the story. Trace?
Megan, even though President Eisenhower's deportation operation has been called a dark period in American history, when Donald Trump says he's heard good reports and bad reports about the plan, he's correct. In fact, for decades, the operation was highly praised by veterans of the Border Patrol who called it effective and inexpensive. Studies from UCLA and the Texas Historical Association put the total number of those deported well below the 1.3 million often cited, but the numbers do show that fewer than 1,000 Border Patrol agents were able to round up and deport up to 3,000 illegal immigrants per day. The program also led to self-deportation and proved to be a deterrent for those who wanted to cross illegally. In fact, by the late 1950s, illegal immigration dropped by 95%, though experts say some of that drop is due to a guest worker program that gave legal status to hundreds of thousands of Mexican farm workers. But the abuse of those deported is also well documented. A congressional investigation found that Latin American immigrants were being transported in crowded buses and, quote, dumped on the other side of the border like livestock, some of whom died from exposure to scorching heat. The study also compared transport ships to 18th century slave ships. Trump's opponents say his plan is unreasonable. Dr. Ben Carson says, quoting here, the 11.5 million people, rounding them up and deporting them may sound good to some people, but it's not pragmatic. Florida Senator Marco Rubio added this. Watch.
I do not believe you can round up and deport 11 million people, especially people that have been here 15 years, have not otherwise violated the law, can pass background checks and so forth. And there's got to be a process to deal with that realistically.
Hillary Clinton also snuck in a jab, calling the plan un-American and inhumane. Trump says it will be humane and he will do it. Megan.
Trace, thank you. Joining me now with more, Jose Antonio Vargas. Jose, thank you for being here. So, you know, Mr. Trump has not signed, he hasn't signed on to that Operation, Wetback as his exact plan, but he does believe in a deportation force. What say you?
Well, the term deportation force and humanely don't go together. I don't even know what that means. There are 4.5 million U.S. citizen kids in this country who has at least one parent who's undocumented. How is that humanely to those U.S. American children? Not anchor babies, U.S. American children. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, by the way, Megan, it's been fascinating these past few months hearing Donald Trump talk about people like us as if we're insects off their backs. I would love for Donald Trump, maybe bring his son, come here in Los Angeles, the epicenter of the undocumented community in this country. Let's go to MacArthur Park. You want to have a conversation about undocumented immigrants and illegal immigration and deportation? Come here, sir. We want to talk to you about it.
Why? What do you mean? What's your point?
Well, the point is, he has been giving these speeches, he's been talking to people, but has Donald Trump actually faced at least some of these 11 million undocumented people that he's talking about? Like when he says
But you know his point, Jose. His point is they broke the law, and what we do, one of the reasons we have immigration enforcement agents is to deport those people who came into the country illegally.
By the way, when I outed myself as undocumented 4 years ago, Megan, it's to say, what do you want to do with us? Poll after poll has shown, by the way, that a majority of the American public want us to stay and be given some sort of a path to legalization. Poll after poll has shown that. By the way, this is the other thing that I find interesting. Donald Trump is running in the Republican ticket. Don't Republicans believe in small government? If you believe in a small government, why would you want to create another large bureaucratic system to deport 11 million people?
And that is where I'm going to pick it
That
up
doesn't make any sense.
with my next guest. Jose, it's always interesting speaking with you. Thank you for being here. Eric Trump is here, as I mentioned. Let's pick it up there, Eric. What about that? Because that's been a criticism that we've heard even from some Republicans of this plan. What about small government? You know, how many agents it would take, how many law enforcement, how many INS or ICE agents it would take?
Well, let me actually start in a different way, right? My father's one of the greatest men in the world. He's an amazing, amazing person. But he wants to put America first, right? There's 100 million people in this country that are out of work. Yet people are coming over the border unchecked every single day, and it's just not right to the Americans who were born here, right? I mean, who have lived here, and you also have a legal system. You have a system where you sign up to come into the country legally.
But even if you have somebody like Jeb Bush, who may agree with that, or Marco Rubio in principle, they say, when it comes to deporting 11.5 million illegal immigrants, and your dad has said he wants to do it in 2 years, you're talking about 500,000 people a month. How is it going to be done? The one estimate was it's going to take between $400 billion and $500 billion to do it.
But the point isn't just deporting them. It's deporting them and letting them back in legally. And he's been so clear about that. And I know the liberal media wants to misconstrue it, but it's deporting them and letting them back legally. But they have to come into the country legally. And there has to be some checks and balances behind it. I mean, what kind of country are we if people can walk across the border and take jobs from people who have lived there their entire lives? I mean, it really hurts an economy. And that's his point. He's an American patriot. He wants to see the best for his country.
But even those who might agree with him in theory, right, that say, you know what, it isn't right. They broke the law. They have jobs that, you know, Americans want. If you accept all that, then there's the method of, well, how do we do it? And back when they did that operation under Eisenhower, you know, some people were killed. There were terrible conditions. They were ripped from families and so on. And it was what many people would consider inhumane. That's been the big question. How could it be done?
Listen, this is a man who raised me. He is one of the most charitable people you'll ever meet. He's one of the greatest fathers you'll ever see in your world. Believe me, he will do it humanely, but he wants to see people come into this country illegally. It's just that simple. He wants to see Americans who are born here have the jobs. He doesn't want to see people come unchecked. And it also causes a great danger. I mean, what is coming into the country? I mean, what is coming over the border? Do you have terrorists coming over the border? Do you have people from the Middle East who have done very bad things coming across the border? I mean, how do you have a country like the United States, right, which is very controversial in many ways, is hated by so many other countries around the world? How do you have a country where you have people coming in unchecked? Have a process. Have people sign up. You know, have people do it legally.
I want to ask
Give
you,
those jobs back to the Americans, you know, who are here.
I have to ask you because I have you here, and Eric heard our first segment with Peggy and Alan. You went to Georgetown?
Georgetown.
Okay, so he grew up in a rich family, right? A powerful father. You go to Georgetown. What do you make of this behavior we're seeing on colleges like Yale, some of the most privileged universities we have?
Well, listen, it's very different from me. My father had me on construction sites at a very, very young age. I worked and I worked and I worked, and I did the worst of the jobs. I was demoing every single wall. I was doing electrical work. I mean, he made us work, and it was the greatest thing.
And I'm sure he never let you hear any offensive words.
No offensive words, ever. No, but it's the greatest thing you could do for a type A kid, I always say, right? I mean, you don't want type A children to have free time. You don't want type A children to have a lot of money. You know, you work, you learn the trades of your skill, and, you know, really instilled a great work ethic in us. And he's an amazing father, and he's an amazing man. And I really think he's going to go all the way in this process.
And you grow up and you look around and you realize you're not a cupcake.
not a cupcake. I'm glad I'm not in this world, right?
Eric, it's great to see you.
It's great being with you.
Thank you for being here. Well, a big development tonight in the Hillary Clinton email scandal, as Fox News learns that the feds are looking to see whether somebody close to the case violated a key law, the very same one that sent Martha Stewart to prison. This case appears to be expanding, and not in a good way for Mrs. Clinton. That's next.